It's being part of a network of like-minded people that coordinates you to act in a positive sum manner. And the EU is better than anybody at that. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for your intervention. Two things I just wanted to say. First thing is, I don't really get why you really stress that point of foreign policy, because if we look back at the last decade, all the conflicts the European Union faced, or let's say the major conflicts like Iraq or Libya, it was when Europe was divided. Apart from that, we wouldn't be able, and that's actually a problem we're discussing now, a common foreign and security policy, we wouldn't be able to react to an international conflict in a direct way. The European battle groups, for example, the project is stalled. They've never been used, and they're a military resource we're just paying for and not using. And the other thing you stressed was the development aid the European Union is paying, and it's right that we're the biggest, let's say, well, we are contributing a lot to foreign development aid, but one thing, in the number you had there, you were adding up the European Union as an institution and the different member states.
Right.
And I think that's a statistical problem, because you sometimes, and we faced that problem many times in the past, let's say France and Germany going to a country, investing in development aid, but doing it in a way that was not very efficient. And if you have that, if you have, for example, a single country doing that, okay, let me put down an example. Germany comes to a village and they build a house or some infrastructure, and then it doesn't work out for some reasons, and afterwards France or Great Britain comes in and does exactly the same. So you've got money invested twice, and it doesn't work out. That wouldn't happen if you got a single unit doing it, but actually being benefiting from the experience they made in the past. So that's just a remark about your development aid statistics.
So these are good questions. So on Libya, I disagree entirely. So I think the European self-perception about cases like Libya is completely backwards. So Europe is exceptionally good at mobilizing coalitions of the willing. There are almost no cases I can think of military action where having all 28 European members serves any purpose whatsoever. Libya is certainly not one of them. It does serve a purpose in a case like sanctions to some extent, because otherwise you could divert, but, and you got it. But Libya, there's absolutely no reason for everybody to come. So here's the way I view Libya, okay? You can think intervening in Libya was a good idea or a bad idea, or the follow-up was good or bad, but let's just talk about the intervention. The Europeans decided they should intervene in Libya. They got it together amongst themselves. Some countries like Germany said, we don't want to do it. And so you have a handful of countries that decide they want to do it. The other countries say, fine, we'll support this quietly, diplomatically, but you guys go do it. They did it. They dragged the Americans in who didn't want to do it. They paid for 75% of it. It cost $1 billion, which is 2,000 times less than what it cost the Americans to intervene in Iraq. And they actually succeeded in what their mission was. Every single newspaper in Europe said, what a failure for Europe. Why? Not for any practical reason. They achieved exactly what they wanted to achieve at a remarkably low cost, very quickly, and dragged the Americans in, right? And pushed the issue, took the initiative. They did for solely a formal reason, because not all 28 people, notably the Germans, showed up. Who cares? It's completely irrelevant. And that's why I think this whole issue of whether you have formal centralization does not matter. It also doesn't matter whether the Europeans can do something on their own. Whenever people make this argument to me, and I've had it made to me in the Council of the European Union in Brussels, I always say to them, name me a case in the last 20 years where the Europeans wanted to go do a military mission and the Americans opposed it and would not give them the military means to do it. And there's a long silence. In fact, since the end of the Cold War, there has only been one military operation by any Western country on which there was substantial disagreement among Western countries. That was the second Iraq War. It's actually completely atypical, although everybody treats it as if it's normal, right? John Mearsheimer, the realist theorist, tells you during the Cold War we were all on the same side, and Europeans and Americans all went and fought the Russians in every case. Totally wrong. In fact, during the Cold War, the Europeans opposed almost everything the Americans did except Lebanon. You know, they were funding people in Nicaragua, were shooting at people we were funding, they were criticizing us in Vietnam and all that kind of thing. All of a sudden, at the end of the Cold War, we were on exactly the same side. The Iraq War was an exception, and everybody in the United States now says it was a mistake, except Ted Cruz, right? So basically, who cares whether the Europeans can do it themselves? It's completely irrelevant. What matters is whether it gets done when the Europeans want it to get done and the Americans don't. And that was the case in Libya. So I just have a strongly different view about this. And finally, on the efficiency of development aid, I think this is an interesting argument. One hears it a lot from kind of technocratically minded people who think that development aid would be better if technocrats could make it coherent. But remember that development aid statistics already include an enormous amount of different kinds of aid from different parts of individual governments that serve different purposes. You know, export credits, agricultural aid, development aid for poverty purposes and things like this, much of which is not coherent already when the United States or France or Germany is giving it. I have yet to see a clear study that shows that multilateral aid is significantly less, or combinations of aid are significantly less efficient, or comes anywhere close to quantifying how much less efficient it is. Even if it were half as efficient, Europe would still be the dominant foreign aid provider in the world. Yes, the lady right here.